Dr. Queena Lee-Chua teaches mathematics, science, and psychology at the Ateneo de Manila University. She's an author of several books, writes for Philippine Daily Inquirer, and is known for making mathematics and science topics interesting and easier to understand. Among her numerous awards are Outstanding Women in the Nation's Service, Carlos Palanca Memorial Awards for Literature English Essay, Outstanding Young Scientist National Academy of Science and Technology, Outstanding Teacher Award Metrobank Foundation, National Book Award for Science, First Multiple Intelligence Award Dr. Howard Gardner Multiple Intelligence International School Foundation Incorporated.
To give you an idea of what Singapore math is, I will trace at least where it came from. So the first one would be, it's actually not unique to Singapore. Okay, Singapore did not invent Singapore math. When I was doing research on that, I wanted to see what was the first instance of pictorial representation. And one of my sources said it was already in use in Euclid's Elements. Euclid, of course, is the father of geometry, the father of Euclidean geometry, the geometry which high school students take usually in third year high school. And in Book 5 of the Elements, there is already a pictorial approach. Of course, it wasn't called model approach. It was just an example of Euclid doing pebbles and stones and doing a very Greek sort of word problem. Model approach, using pictures to do math is actually very intuitive. People who don't have formal schooling in math, many times they would just rely on pictures. Even scribbling, counting, tallying would be very, very intuitive. The US, several of the mathematicians and the math education specialists have actually used pictorial representation, except they have not formalized it. And the reason why this pictorial approach is now called Singaporean math, for short, is because it was Singapore, tiny Singapore, which formalized that approach and made it the basis of their textbook series. And Singapore only did it recently, actually in the 1970s and the 1980s, when the Singapore Ministry of Education, basically there's one development institute, Curriculum Development Institute of Singapore. I know one of the Deputy Minister of Singapore. His name is Deputy Minister Tan Yap Kwang, and he told me the history. And he said, before the 1980s, Singapore was using they're a British colony, British books, which is very, very highly Americanized. And he says they were doing okay. But they decided that, well, when they hit upon the pictorial approach, they felt this was an approach which the West was not really popularizing. They had it, but they did not really make it big. So Singapore decided, and they had several of the top educators, they started doing and formalizing word problems and making the pictorial approach formalized. If you use Marshall Cavendish, you will see model approach being introduced in grade 2. So they have very, very easy addition and subtraction problems, which makes you feel if all of us, none of us except my son, was raised in the Singaporean math way. So for us, when you first start learning it, you feel, why am I doing all of these boxes if it's so easy to do it the American way? You will see the power of it once the word problems become more complex. For instance, in ratio and proportion, my son will show you the pictorial approach. The model approach uses the pictorial method to show part-whole relationships, to do the givens and unknowns. Instead of just writing given and unknown, they actually make you draw it. So you can see how big one unit, one box. The thing I really like about Singapore math is the topics are a lot fewer, which means you spend more time, which means you will inevitably you would develop more mastery than if you did more topics on the surface. So it's depth rather than breadth. And it's geometric, not just algebraic. So when you do a word problem, if you do the traditional one, it is let x, let n. There's nothing wrong with that. That's very important. But here you can have the let n. You can also have a geometric version. Psychologically, kids who are more spatial and more visual will not be as turned off. And they're essential math skills for mastery rather than repetition. Yes, there's repetition, of course, in Singapore math. But because there's depth, you don't have to conk them on the head too much. And it's analytic rather than just relying on rote memory and keywords. And Singapore math centers on multi-step problem solving. So multi-step problem solving is very important. Why do we even do math if we're not going to do problem solving? Math is not some torture chamber. The heart of math is problem solving. For most people, it's the mindset, it's the perseverance, it's the patience, it's the analysis. The nice thing about Singapore math, at least in grades 1 to 6, math cannot be concrete forever. That's one thing I need to say. You cannot, there are many things in math which are really abstract, which we cannot make into real life. Some math is just really abstract, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in Singapore math, at least in grades 1 to 6, arithmetic is very concrete. So every time they introduce a new problem or a new topic, Singapore math approach will give them problem solving, promotes higher order thinking skills, of course. And this one, my son swears by it. He's doing algebra now. He's just introduced to algebra this year. I'm not a fan of making them do advanced because I want him to master arithmetic. So unlike other parents I know, which happens a lot in our school, okay, wherein some of their kids are forced into algebra in grade 3 or 4. Why? Okay? My son is just doing algebra now. But he says algebra is not very hard because he knows the pictorial boxes. So he says for him, X is just one box. So 2 boxes. So it eases the transition from arithmetic to algebra, which for many of us would actually be traumatic. There are some cons, and I have to say it, being very blunt. Since it does death rather than breath, inevitably, many topics are not covered. And this is a con if you're a math contestant. Singapore math doesn't want to give you the terms. It wants to tell you the concept, but it doesn't give you the terms. The textbooks are expensive by Filipino standards. It's an excellent textbook. It's colored, it's very nice, but it's more expensive than the ordinary local newsprint black and white textbook. There's some cultural differences. The money, for example, is in Singapore dollars rather than peso. Better at this than I am. So these are problems he did. Scott, you better make sure there's an answer, okay? Because I didn't even solve them. So he just made the questions. So he will demonstrate the old way. The old way meaning the way we're used to without Singapore math. So you can see the difference.
Old way. So their problem is ratio, since this is where you can really see how useful model approach is.
Ratio problem 3. The ratio of the number of rattles to blocks to balls that baby Mario has is 3:7:5. If he has 45 toys in all, how many balls does he have?
Rattles, blocks, balls. So once again, we represent each of these with boxes. 3, 7, and 5. If he has 45 toys in all, how many balls does he have? Here, we can label all 3 or all the boxes with 45, since he has 45 toys in all. Before we can figure out how much each represents, or how much even each box represents, let's count the boxes first. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 boxes. 15 boxes is equivalent to 45. So where do we go from here? How much does one of these represent? 3 can be used as all the values of each box. And now it's easy. How many balls does he have? If you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 3, he has 15 balls. There. Okay. So there's a principle of Singaporean math that says before you can get 2 units or 3 units or 4 units, you have to first know 1 unit. So how much is 1 unit? You have to know fractions, but that doesn't mean you have to have a hard time solving fractions. This is the shortcut in solving fractions. But if you have this problem and you know Singaporean math, but you don't know what 3/5 is, it won't be any use to you. So you still have to know the course. The pet shop has both black and orange goldfish for sale. Of the 72 goldfish that they currently have, 3/8 of them are black. How many orange goldfish does the pet shop have for sale? How many boxes should I draw before I start shading? 8. How many of them should I shade black? 3. How many boxes are orange? 5. All of these. I forgot to mention this. There are 3 parts of a model. There's the boxes area, there's the question mark, and there is always the total. And the total is 72 goldfish. Let's go back to the units principle. How much does one box represent? 9.
72 divided by 8 is 9.
What we multiply 9 by to get the unknown? That is a trick question in our quiz. By what number do we multiply 9 to get the unknown? 5. Therefore, the answer is 45.
Singapore Math is a curriculum developed by Singapore Education Ministry for use in Singapore schools. Singapore Math uses simple explanation to solve hard concepts through the use of bar models, making math easier and simpler to understand. It focuses on fundamental math skills, builds upon preceding levels, and does not repeat subjects that were already taught. This minimizes the need for repetitive drills. After using the Singapore Math, Singaporeans scored high in competitions like SISS or Second International Science Study in 1984, ranking 16th out of 26 nations, and number 1 in TIMSS or Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study in 1995. Singapore topped the TIMSS ranking in 2007. Singapore Math is continuously changing. More methodologies and principles of teaching are developed to adapt to the changing times. And since its popularity grew, many countries such as Chile, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, South Africa, Panama, USA, France, Pakistan, India, Indonesia, and the Philippines have adapted it to their local requirements.